Yeah, for me, as Annie was saying, it really is a personal journey. I'm a researcher and an academic, but my passion for self-compassion comes from my personal life. I learned about self-compassion my last year of graduate school when I was going through a stressful time, and I really saw immediately the powerful impact it had on my life and my ability to help myself through some stressful and emotionally painful times. And as Annie alluded to, where I really saw it most powerfully was when my son got diagnosed with autism. I had about 7 years of self-compassion practice under my belt at that point. And it made all the difference in the world. Being able to sit with the feelings that were coming up, feelings I thought I wasn't supposed to be having, like disappointment. You aren't supposed to feel that about your son, that you love more than anything else in the world. But I knew because of my self-compassion practice, not only did I need to allow everything to be there in a mindful way, but I needed to embrace myself, soothe and comfort myself, care for myself in the midst of this difficult time. And over again, situation after situation, I've really seen the power of this in my own life. And that's really what's driven, my research career. Having said that, I do have done research on self-compassion. So, So my conception of self-compassion really is drawn from Buddhist psychology. I practice in the insight meditation tradition. And when I first got to University of Texas at Austin, I knew I wanted to study self-compassion, especially as an alternative to self-esteem, which is very problematic for many reasons. And although a lot of people had talked about self-compassion, including maybe the humanistic psychologists, no one had actually operationally defined, measured, or researched self-compassion. So that's really what I set out to do. So I read pretty much every book I could get my hand on. I'm pretty much in the Buddhist tradition. And I tried to think, well, what is self-compassion really? And from my point of view, self-compassion isn't any different than the experience of compassion for others. It's just inner compassion as opposed to outer compassion. The main difference being we're much more used to and habitually we're much more likely to give compassion to others than ourselves. But I think when you're trying to understand what self-compassion is, it really is useful to start with what compassion for others feels like. Okay. So if you're walking down the street and there's this woman by the side of the road, what has to happen? What factors need to arise in order for you to have compassion for her? Empathy? Who said that? Right there, empathy. Okay, so you need to feel what she's feeling, or?
It's some sort of identification in need of what's happening.
Okay, so some sort of emotional resonance, yeah?
Curiosity?
Curiosity? Okay. A particular type of curiosity? Like, curious, like, where did she get those shoes? No, that's not what you mean. I can't see who said that. Curious about what her life may be, her history, right? I mean, what if you're walking down the street, texting? Are you going to have compassion for this woman?
You've got to notice her.
You've got to notice her. You have to notice her, and you have to notice something about her, and that she's suffering. Right? You might notice her enough to just like, oh, get out of the way, to continue with your text. But to have compassion, the first thing you have to do is look at her and say, wow, that must be so hard. She's an old lady, she's on the street, is she getting the services she needs? So you need to notice that she's suffering. And then, some people might do that and get kind of irritated, right? She's probably drunk, get her off the street. That's not compassion. So with compassion, there's an opening of the heart, a sense of care, kind of a tender concern for the fact that she's suffering. And then the last part, which is alluded to, is there's some sense of connection with this woman. Instead of looking down on her, instead of pitying her, it's something like, there but for the grace of God go I. All human beings are vulnerable. This is part of the human condition. We are equal at some level, even though she's suffering more than I am. Okay. So that's really how I define self-compassion. 3 components. By the way, I just have to say, I have never used a Venn diagram in my life. The only reason I'm doing it is that Paul yesterday, for the first time I've ever seen him speak, did not use his Venn diagrams. And I felt, we can't have a conference without Venn diagrams. So this is an honor for Paul. Right, so there's really 3 components. There's kindness, there's the opening of the heart. There's mindfulness, that's noticing. You know, instead of just ignoring or resisting or avoiding, is turning toward and seeing the suffering. And then common humanity. And I find it interesting because you very rarely see common humanity embedded in definitions of compassion. It's not really talked about. Usually it's something like concern for the alleviation of suffering and the motivation to do something about it. But really implicitly in almost every definition of compassion you see, there's this idea that there has to be some sort of interconnectedness between people for it to be compassion and not something like pity. Okay, so how does this manifest with self-compassion? I really look at self-compassion as it relates to our personal experiences of suffering, whether it's failure, feeling inadequate, making a mistake, or just other difficult experiences that happen in our life.